Hi, I'm Megan. Welcome to today's live reading of Summer of Possibility by Krysten Lindsay Hager, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Join me. Chapter 1. Everyone in my family is considered exceptional. Exceptional. My mom is a best-selling romance author. My great-grandmother wrote a classic novel that's still widely read. My dad's a top lawyer. And then there's me. I was always a good student, but it was obvious that I was never going to get into an Ivy League school or take any college by storm. I was too uncoordinated to be considered good at sports, and while I didn't make a fool of myself singing, there weren't any music programs beating down my door. No one ever made me feel less than, but I never felt like I could measure up to my more successful family members. My cousins were always winning awards, scholarships, and getting promotions, but I was just, well, kind of there. But this summer was going to be different. I had finally found something I enjoyed and was also good at, and that I could hopefully make a career out of. I'd started writing for fun a while back, but had kept it a secret because I was worried about comparison to my mom and great grandmother's talent. Then in fall, I got curious about taking a creative writing class my high school was offering. Things went well, and my creative writing teacher had me submit my portfolio for a writing workshop intensive on Stargazer Island. I was thrilled to be accepted as we spend weeks working on manuscripts and have access to a big name writer who would critique our work. However, I started to get nervous as the date for the workshop grew closer. I had been dating one of the guys in the class who'd also been accepted, and I poured out my concerns to Aiden when we met for coffee. I don't know if I'm ready. I twisted a strand of my dark red hair around my finger. I've always been a dip your toes in the water kind of girl, not the type who dives right in. He chewed on the earpiece of his glasses and nodded. Well, Cagney, I've heard it's a sink or swim thing, but it's a big opportunity, so just look at it as a new adventure. Don't put too much pressure on yourself to come out of this with the great American novel. I nodded, but it was easier said than done, seeing as some people thought my great grandmother had written the great American novel. Still, it helped me knowing Aidan would be there. After all, he had taken an early interest in my work and even convinced me to join a small critique group. It seemed like he understood me in ways I hadn't found before, and he introduced me to another writer, Sarah Bates, who had been accepted into the program as well. Sarah and I had hit it off, and since we were planning to go to the same local college in the fall, I was going to move into her dorm since her roommate had changed her mind about living on campus. I had to admit it did make me squirm that the one thing I was good at had to be the very thing my great grandmother and mother excelled at. It was basically setting me up for harsh reviews and comparisons. It was not easy to be Raina Arnold's granddaughter or Carolina Edison's daughter. However, I rationalized that I could use my last name, Innes. I could even come up with a pen name if I really wanted to distance myself. Still, I couldn't help but think, why did it have to be writing, of all things? I took a sip of my latte as I studied Aiden's face. Are you nervous about it? Aiden ran his hands through his dark blonde hair. I'm wondering about the feedback I'll get. It's intimidating, but I submitted my stuff so I wouldn't always wonder what if. I'm just trying to put this whole thing in perspective, I guess. My shoulders relaxed knowing he'd be there with me at the workshop. Aiden was funny, smart, and one of those people whom you could have deep late night talks with. On our first date, Aiden asked me if I wanted to grab coffee and talk, and we wound up sitting in the restaurant so long we ordered dinner and then dessert. After that, we started hanging out regularly, spending time at the library and texting throughout the day. I had gone from being single to having a boyfriend who felt like my best friend as well. Doing this with him was going to be an amazing experience. I could only see how it would bring us closer together. I'm excited to visit Stargazer Island too, I smiled. I've only been there once around Christmas, but I hear the island is super fun during the summer. Aiden shrugged. I'm not sure how much of the island we'll be exploring. I mean, we're there to have intensive classes and meet with an advisor and get feedback from that author, Johnny Storm, on making our work better. My focus is to have at least half a book finished by the end of the workshop. So much for romantic walks down the main street. Of course, that's the priority. After all, our first assignment was to bring a short story or the beginning of a novel that we wanted to expand during the class. Did you finish your first assignment? He asked. I have 5 chapters of a novel along with an outline of where I wanted to take the story to develop it. Finishing a novel is going to be my biggest challenge because I struggled to finish my novella in class. He tilted his head and stared at me. Writer's block? Sort of. The teacher felt my problem was my intimidation holding me back due to my family name. That's part of the reason he wanted me to apply for the workshop. He felt it was just what I needed to take my writing to the next level. Aiden slurped his coffee. I'm sure your family connections didn't hurt in you getting accepted. I blinked in surprise. Actually, I asked him to keep my family out of it. I didn't add that the teacher said it might give me an edge into getting selected. I didn't want him to do that, but he told me to trust him. Still, it made me uncomfortable that Aiden even brought it up. I decided to change the subject. The hardest part was finding an idea that would inspire me to keep working on it the whole workshop. That and writing an outline. I'm apparently not a plotter, so having to turn in an outline makes me nervous. He nodded. Same. I tend to run out of gas on a story when I have an outline written. It al- it takes away the impulse to let the story take me where it wants to go. I once heard my mother say in an interview that you tend to be harder on the material you hand wrote than on what you type up. She said her best work was always what she ruthlessly edited, and she did a better job with handwritten writing. I didn't share that with him because it was just a reminder of my mom's success. She worked hard to get where she was, and I was uncomfortable with the idea anyone would think I was trying to get anywhere on her coattails. His phone rang. I gotta take this. Anyway, I better get home and finish packing. He kissed me on the cheek and I headed home. I pulled into my parents' driveway. Originally, I was going to stay here while attending college in the fall, as the school was pretty close. I was still hoping to get into one of the several colleges I had been waitlisted by. However, staying local made sense, seeing as I worked part-time as my mom's assistant. Mom was about to leave on a out on a nationwide book tour for her latest romance novel. I normally went with her, but because of the workshop, she had hired a new assistant to take over. Mom walked in. All packed for your workshop, Cagney? Yep. I'm glad we're getting our first critique right away, but I hope I'm not crying in a corner when it's over. You'll be fine. I wish you'd let me take a look at your work, but I understand. I was the same way and wouldn't let Grandma look at my stories. Maybe down the road, though. I only want to help. I bit my lip. Mom had mentored a few students over the years, and I knew she always wanted to bring out the best of people's work, but I really wanted to start out on my own. My goal was to create my own name for myself. I just hoped she could understand that. The next morning, I woke up excited and nervous. I double-checked my list and my suitcase and ate a small breakfast as I waited for Aiden to pick me up. We had a 2-hour drive to get to the port, and he put on an audiobook to keep us focused on something other than our nerves. Listening to one of Johnny's books will help us understand how his mind works better. Aiden glanced over at me. This was his first bestseller that put him on the map. I read 2 of his books to get a feel for his writing, too. It's a lot darker than what I usually read, but he's definitely talented. Aiden and I arrived at the port and got on the ferry to go over to the island. There was an older couple sitting nearby holding hands. When the water got choppy, the woman put both of her hands on the headrest of the seat in front of her, and the man moved his arm around her to calm her. She looked over at him and leaned her head on his shoulder. He patted her arm and whispered to her while she took deep breaths. It was so sweet the way he was trying to soothe her nerves. When we docked, I watched as the man helped her off the boat since she was a bit unsteady from the trip. He kissed her on the forehead and picked up her tote bag. Aiden squeezed my arm as we got off the ferry and we looked out on the main street of the island. I can't wait to check out some of these shops and all these cute restaurants, I said. Look at that bookstore window. I want to see what they have in there. It's all so inviting. Yeah, there will be time for that, but remember, Cagney, our focus is to come out of this with a manuscript to sell. He signaled for a buggy to pick up our luggage to take us to the hotel where the workshop was being held. The hotel we were staying in had 3 different houses, and I was glad we were in separate areas so I could concentrate better. He dropped me off at my room while he went to unpack. My room had a large queen-size bed with a blue floral bedspread, a small kitchen area with a mini fridge, coffee pot, and microwave, a bathroom, and on the other side of the wall was a sitting area with a floral couch, a royal blue overstuffed armchair, a big screen TV, and a walnut desk and chair. There was a private balcony off the sitting area that overlooked the courtyard. The desk looked a touch small, and I had to smile as I thought about how my mother always checked the size of the desks in the rooms that we stayed in over the years to make sure they were big enough for her laptop and all her notes. My mother could only write at a desk, but I loved cozy spaces where I could pile on the blankets, grab a cup of tea, and settle in with my laptop for uninterrupted writing time. In fact, I brought my favorite blue flowered throw with me. The sitting area was the perfect homey area to work on my book. The fact that the room had its own small coffee and tea station meant I could spend more time focused on writing and less time making coffee and tea runs. This was going to be great.